So next up on the agenda, we have Amar, Archie, Jaykaran, who is going to be sharing with us a presentation on asset management theory. But before he starts, let me tell you a bit about who Archie is. So I have his bio here, which I'll read out. In recent years prior to retirement, Archie acquired experience in various key roles, such as plant management, maintenance engineering, maintenance management, and asset management of physical infrastructure within the energy industry as well as education. Presently, he is a member of the Asset Management Chapter of the SAIEE and the chairperson of the Asset Management Working Group of the Power Institute of East and Southern Africa. His objectives is to use his experience and knowledge to actively be involved in skills development, auditing, and consulting, with the purpose of working with organizations or teams towards achieving optimal service delivery. Archie has started his career as a qualified Red Seal electrician from Olifantsfontein. He has a national diploma and MBA and 2 government tickets, one in electrical engineering and one in mechanical engineering for factories. He has completed a program in asset and maintenance management through the University of Pretoria. Over to you, Archie.
Thank you. Good morning, honored guests, affiliates of the AMEU and the SAIEE, and the online audience currently watching the session from various locations. It is a pleasure to present on behalf of the South African Institute of Electrical Engineers a perspective on asset management. We humans have achieved much in terms of living well. We have managed to acquire more comfort and convenience than any other generation in the past. We are blessed to be living in the most sophisticated and technologically advanced period in all of humanity's presence on this planet. Much of our existence and comforts of the life continue to depend on the services and products obtained from highly mechanized and automated industries. We have become dependent on services such as continuous supply of water, uninterrupted availability of electricity, access to various destinations via good transport infrastructure, namely roads and railways, efficient effluent elimination, etc. We, including the people we serve, all want to live well. More than ever, this depends on the continued integrity of physical assets. However, when these assets fail, not only is the economy under threat, and not only is the provision of services interrupted, but our very survival and comforts of life threatened. As a result, the processes by which asset failure occurs and what must be done to manage them are becoming very high priorities indeed. This presentation is aimed at instilling some knowledge and awareness in the principles of good asset management. Although the theme is centered on electricity distribution, I would like to emphasize that these principles are applicable not only to the electrical networks, it is applicable to most infrastructure assets in industries, utilities, munis, etc. I will cover in the time allocated to me the following aspects. What is asset management? Improving revenue through sustaining asset delivery, a view of the maturity, standards that govern asset management, what we are dealing with in terms of our current predicament and challenges, and an implementation approach and conclusion. Asset management is a process that guides the planning, acquisition, and operation, maintenance, and end-of-life management of physical assets. The primary objective of asset management is to maximize performance, which is asset delivery, manage risk, and of course, the performance over the life of the asset. The interplay between asset management is depicted in this diagram over here. The illustration shows the interplay of the key driving forces in the life of an asset, namely cost, performance, and risk. Improving performance while reducing costs and ensuring risks are managed is undoubtedly the greatest challenge for most asset managers. The life cycle of an asset is generally referred to as ideation to dissolution. We've heard the term womb to tomb, etc. It is typically represented by these so-called silos of planning, design, acquisition, commissioning, operate and maintain, and retirement. And there are certain aspects that run across the entire life cycle, such as risk management, asset information management, human resource management, finance management. And if we look at each of the subsets within them, for example, planning deals with planning integration, investment planning, asset replacement and refurbishment. If we look at design, it looks at network design and application guides, etc. Acquisition deals with contract management, project management, procurement of assets and related services. Commissioning deals with handover to operational staff, asset information documentation, communication, commissioning tests. And then we get into the operational phase of the asset, which is operate and maintain. You deal with your maintenance schedules, your maintenance execution, the spares and the logistics around it. And of course, the end of life management, which is around replacement, retirement, and disposal. We often find a degree of ambiguity in the understanding of what is asset management and what is maintenance management. This picture aims to clarify that asset management applies to all the life cycle stages, namely planning, acquisition, operation, maintenance, end of life management. Whereas maintenance management is but one aspect of it. If one looks at maintenance management, the purpose of maintenance is ensuring that physical assets perform as per the design. This graph gives you an illustration of the performance of an asset over a period of time. And most assets generally deteriorate over time, 89% of them at least. And maintenance has a purpose in that it tries to close this gap. The idea is to try and achieve design performance, but we all know too well that once the asset starts aging and over a period of time, maintenance can only do so much to the asset. It cannot restore it to its design performance. And this is where we look at other aspects. And typically, refurbishment comes in here. Refurbishment aims to do what maintenance cannot and tries to close the gap to design performance. Sometimes we achieve that, most times not. If one looks at the bathtub curve and we look at how does maintenance and end-of-life management, the relationship between the two of them, you will notice that the bathtub curve is made up of your infant mortality, your useful life, and then, of course, end of life. The maintenance aspect is done in the middle of the way, we call it the useful life. Extending the useful life of assets can be through various means. And typically, the terminology that we use in this space here is sweating the assets. Let's call it sweating the assets in the right way. So maintenance, end-of-life management, refurbishment, etc. This is what it's all about. Asset management can be seen as a top-down approach or a bottom-up approach. It is certainly not a one-sided approach. In the top-down scenario, top management defines the strategic value. Pardon me, sets the direction, etc. Whereas operational environment starts looking at maintenance, your inspections, your recording, etc. But there is feedback that has to go from the bottom to the top as well, and that is condition monitoring, your reliability leaders, and of course, the execute strategy in this process. The typical priorities in the operational, tactical, and strategic level of an organization deals with managing individual assets over the life cycle, managing your system, managing your asset portfolio, where your typical priorities and values are set by the top tier, strategic management, where they manage stakeholder expectation. And we look at efficiency and effectiveness and the activities related at the operational level in the organization. Another way to demonstrate the three levels in an organization is some of the terminologies used in asset management, such as your maintenance execution plan, which is ideally situated in the operational level in the organization. Whereas your business plan, your strategic driver, your asset management policies, which is coming in terms of your business objectives, sits in the strategic level. In between these two, you have the tactical level, which deals with your strategic asset management plan. And of course, asset management plan is an overlap between the tactical and the operational level. This is a high-level view or a line of sight for the different documents that sit in the asset management space. Asset management is about influencing and managing assets over the life of an asset to ensure a return on investment. This must be done in a way that upturns performance, improves service delivery, and or increases or sustains the all-important revenue. When one looks at the life cycle of an asset, I would like to demonstrate two aspects of the costing involved in the life cycle of an asset. So the blue graph illustrates the costs incurred during the life of an asset. It is quite clear in this graph here that 80% of the life cycle costs are incurred in the operational phase. However, I want to emphasize that that 80% of the cost that's incurred over there is as a result of the direct correlation of the 80% of the life cycle costs that are determined in the acquisition phase. So if you look at this graph over here, it says very clearly that most of the costs that are in asset management, and especially in the O&M phase, are determined in the early phases of the life cycle, where after commissioning, only 20% of the asset reliability can be influenced. In essence, what it's saying to us is that to influence the total cost of an asset, the total expenditure, most of the costs are already locked in when the asset is commissioned. And if you want to reduce your total cost of expenditure, one has to look at how in the acquisition phase, one can actually change the dynamics of your operational expenditure. So how would one actually do that? In the design and the concept or the acquisition phase, one needs to look at eliminating unnecessary complexity. Look at material and component specification. Look at the life expectancy and how you can lower costs. Look at designing out maintenance, and maybe one would need to rephrase that to also say, do not design assets that have maintenance-intensive activities. Rather, change it to a point where the cost of maintenance is actually reduced. The next slide aims to demonstrate the saving that can be achieved if one is looking at an investment and you have three options, where in the first option, the cost of the investment is lowest in terms of capex. It is generally the kind of approach that we would follow through. Because of the capex costs being least, we would generally follow through and invest in that asset. However, least realizing that the operational cost of the asset over the total life makes up a significant portion of it. When we look at option 3, where there's an increase in the capex side, where you look at equipment specification, you look at maintenance, eliminating the unnecessary activities, designing out continuous going upwards and backwards to the machine itself, you can increase your capex cost slightly. However, that increase will make a significant difference in the total expenditure because it will reduce your operational costs. And that is what one should try to achieve. We want to try and achieve a state where the total expenditure over the life of the asset is reduced. So in so doing, looking at option 3, you would make a significant saving in the organization. Option 2 obviously is an overkill overspend of your investment, and there is really no investment benefit over the total life of the asset. The following graphs show a little bit more insight into it. So when we look at the portfolio risk of an asset, you will find that assets that have a low annual expenditure, where you've not done the necessary asset maintenance, asset management correctly, the risk over 10 years is extremely high because you've spent nothing. On the other hand, if you've overspent, you will find that you might have a low portfolio risk. What you want to try and achieve is somewhere in the middle, where you have an optimal spend, where over the period of time, your annual expenditure is moderate, and over the 10-year life cycle, your risk after 10 years has been reduced. Where do you spend the first buck that you have? So different asset classes, different asset portfolios have different sensitivities of risk. It is very important that you invest your first buck on that portfolio that is going to give you the greatest impact in terms of your risk portfolio. When we look at the insight into long-term consequences, and the first one is your asset performance based on a portfolio, you will find that your performance would significantly deteriorate if you spend nothing over a period of time. However, you could overspend and you would still have a high degree of good performance. That might not be the optimal position that you want. You want to have an optimal spend value where your performance is pretty stable over the period of time. This graph shows the possible condition of your asset after a period of time, where the spend is zero or very little. The condition of your assets are quite bad, and that will lead to continuous failure. And of course, because they might be expensive assets, the long lead times will create problems. You want to try and achieve the green part of your portfolio. Overinvestment is not necessarily the best thing to be done. If we look at what we would like to spend, we would like to not underinvest. So the red graph is not where you want to be in terms of your balance sheet. Your blue graph is being over-optimistic, it's overspending, and what you really want to achieve is the green line over there. When all said and done, if you spend optimally, your portfolio risk will be at a level that you can tolerate. Whereas if you don't spend anything, the risk is going to be very, very high. And we see that in our current situation with many of our infrastructure assets in the state-owned enterprises, etc. How would one improve performance and look at a shift in value, or look at an add in value through a shift in focus? So this graph here demonstrates that over a period of time, the first few years, you can improve your performance by your learning and improvement. You would then improve a performance a little more by managing the initiatives that you've introduced in the first, and then of course, looking at a focus of governance. Then strategic initiatives would kick in to improve your performance. And finally, drive through reliability. The value add in the first bit is through the OPEX focus. The second bit would be as a result of CAPEX expenditure. Your value add comes in, and if you see the curly brackets here, improvement in those areas. Your greatest improvement comes in the first few years through learning, improvement, and etc. You want to try and get to maximum achievement in terms of your shift. When you look at asset management, and you had to say, so what would be the ideal end state if I were to introduce asset management, and what would be the level of maturity that I want to try and achieve? Sorry, excuse me. So I've listed a few things here that are relevant in terms of asset management. Firstly, an accurate asset register with reliable information is absolutely important. And that would be one of the top priorities, or would be when you've matured as an organization, to be able to say, I've got a very accurate asset register and have very, very reliable information. I want to go to number 16 and number 17, where it says also a situation where the organization is not in firefighting mode. So once your asset management starts maturing, you will find that your costs are predictable and not in a case where it's not predictable. And then you would also know where to spend all your improvement resources, and you want to break that cycle where things are failing. You would have well-defined business processes. Standardization would be important in terms of asset information, maintenance strategies, maintenance plans, etc. Your investment decisions would be based on least economic costs. And you would also focus on the total cost of ownership, and at an optimal level, your maintenance, ops, and end-of-life management would be very proactively embedded in all the asset plans, also taking into account that many of your assets are long lead time items. So making sure that you are proactive, that when you start looking at end-of-life management, you start the procurement process not when the asset fails, but way before that. You would look at synchronized integration of different asset life cycles. So let's look at number 13, end-of-life plans for assets that are based on asset health, taking into account obsolescence, performance, operating context. And if you are a multi-tier organization, you can have it first based at the lowest level, and then you can consolidate it as you go upwards. You will optimize it based on certain factors, and you prioritize it based on conditions. And if you've got a good asset management plan, it will lead to a strategic asset management plan where it will become well-funded because you have timeless and well-thought-out programs. You would have a well-founded strategic decision-making. And of course, it goes without saying that you would have an asset management policy and strategic asset management plan. So what are the standards that govern asset management? Bear with me. In South Africa, we have two governance documents, namely the ISO 55000 and the NRS 093. The adoption of the ISO 55000 series as the international standards enables an organization to achieve its objectives through effective and efficient management of assets. The ISO 55000 is the application of an asset management system which provides assurance that asset management objectives can be achieved consistently and sustainably over time. The elements of ISO 55000 are the ISO 55000 2014, which is this one in front. It provides an overview of asset management, its principles and terminology, and the expected benefits of adopting asset management. It also provides the context for ISO 55000 and ISO 55002. The ISO 55001 provides requirements for how to operate the system, within which activities are defined, organized, and managed. The international standard specifies a requirement for the establishment, implementation, maintenance, and improvement of the management system for asset management, which is referred to as the asset management system. The ISO 55002 provides guidance for the application of the management system for asset management, referred to as a management system, in accordance with the requirements of ISO 55001. This standard contains explanatory text necessary to clarify the requirements specified in ISO 55001. And it provides examples to support implementation. It does not, however, provide guidance for managing specific asset type. It is intended to be used for managing physical assets in particular, but it can also be applied to other asset types. It does not provide financial accounting or technical guidance for managing specific asset types. The next slide provides a high-level summary of the context of ISO 55000. So you will find that there are typically areas of organizational context, leadership, planning, support, operation, performance evaluation, improvement, where there's more detail that is provided in the ISO 55000 guidelines. And this is just a summary of that. When one looks at NRS 093, which is the detailed for, let's call it the South African context, the NRS 093 covers both the ISO 55000 as well as the life cycle stages. The NRS 093 provides a lot of detail in each of these different life cycle stages. It provides sufficient detail for somebody that wants to start off their business in knowing what needs to be done in planning, knowing what needs to be done in the design space, the acquisition, the commissioning, operate and maintain, and in terms of end-of-life management, together with the, call it the attributes that run across the entire life cycle. Some of the current predicaments facing many of our organizations are aging assets. Our assets are getting older, and since the replacements of these assets are a challenge, we need to sweat these assets fittingly. The management of new assets differs significantly from how one manages old assets. Costs are increasing exponentially, while revenue is on the decline. Costs are incurred by poor maintenance, poor management of the life cycle, incorrect investment, etc. As the fourth industrial revolution kicks in and the growing need for artificial increases, we see a greater demand on reliability. Allocation of funds for CAPEX and OPEX are decreasing. Not only is a decrease in finance, but there's also a decrease in staffing. We find that many companies are not replacing personnel when they leave. We're finding that we have to do more with less. The planning horizons for new or replacement of assets are decreased substantially, and we have much shorter timeframes to do these things. So what's limiting us from achieving good asset management? Firstly, capital expenditure that is based on least capital cost. This is not sustainable. Planning and designs that do not look at the total life cycle of an asset. We don't have proper internal benchmarking or comparisons. Departments working in silos. Poor monitoring and reporting, where most of our performance indicators are lagging indices. And there's a lack of reliable information for making good decisions. We have incomplete asset registers, and management of our computerized maintenance management system is very poor. And of course, incorrect maintenance and asset management strategies, where we do not have any or minimal condition monitoring or inspection information. Poorly defined end-of-life management plans or refurbishment plans, no or inconsistent assurance being performed. So, since asset management is a systematic approach for investing, acquiring, maintaining, and operating physical assets in a cost-effective way, it therefore delivers benefits to us that are realized in areas of these things. The benefits of asset management can include, but are not limited to, the following. Improved financial performance. Improving the return on investment and reducing CAPEX and OPEX can be achieved while preserving asset value without sacrificing the short or long-term realization of organizational objectives. Informed asset management decisions, thereby enabling the organization to improve its decision-making and effectively balance cost, risk, and opportunities and performance. Demonstrated social responsibility by improving the ability, for example, to conserve resources, go green, or reduce emissions and adapt to climate change. Organizations to demonstrate social responsibility, ethical behavior, and practical and good stewardships. Reducing financial, managing risk, reducing financial losses, improving health and safety, goodwill and reputation, minimizing environmental and social impact can result in reduced liabilities, such as insurance premium fines and penalties. Improve services and outputs by ensuring that performance of assets can lead to improved services that consistently meet or exceed the expectation of customers. demonstrated compliance by transparently conforming to legal, statutory, and regulatory requirements, as well as adhering to asset management policies and processes can enable the demonstration of compliance. Enhanced reputation and brand improvement through customer satisfaction, stakeholder awareness, and confidence. Improved organizational sustainability, effectively managing short, medium, and long-term effects, expenditures, and performance can improve the sustainability and operations of an organization. And finally, improved efficiency and effectiveness, reviewing and improving processes, procedures, and asset performance can improve efficiency and effectiveness and the achievement of organizational objectives. I would like to share with you 3 approaches to implementing asset management. The first one is the NRS 093. It has been prepared as a guideline to establish and promote uniform requirements for the implementation of asset management. It provides sufficient detail on the requirements for the various life cycle stages in asset management. It does not detail how to. When one looks at the ISO 55000, internationally and locally, the current trend for asset management is to look at ISO 55000. Although ISO 55000 provides a valuable structure, there are limitations. It only defines what needs to be done, not how, and defines competent asset management, not best practices. Finally, the asset management roadmap provides a practical implementation approach. It has been specially developed for smaller municipalities. It focuses on the principles of good asset management. It describes what needs to be done, how it needs to be done, and the outcomes for the different levels of achievement. So again, in ISO 55000, you will have the 6 key areas, which is strategy and planning, asset information, lifecycle delivery, decision-making, organization and people, and the risk and review. In the NRS, you have the different lifecycle stages such as planning, design, acquisition, ops, maintenance, and end-of-life management. And of course, in the principles of good asset management, you will be talking about knowing your assets, things such as basic asset inventory, identifying asset components, current data, software, and tools. Managing your asset life cycle, the way you would look at asset condition, your level of service, your renewal alternatives, your basic asset management strategies, your current investments in understanding the financial situation, the current O&M costs, understanding your future CAPEX costs, funding sources, etc. Good decision-making, where you would evaluate your decision-making process and you would have a prioritized plan. And of course, knowing the rules, such as your strategic goals, your policies, etc., and the legal obligations and standards, and monitoring for sustainability. This is the approach of choice for smaller munis. Not only are the principles of good asset management the preconditions required for good asset management, but they are also the prerequisite one needs to have in place should one aspire to be ISO 55000 compliant in the future. This journey with the principles of good asset management should be seen as a precursor to ISO 55000 compliance. Pursuing a practice that focuses on the good asset management supports the goal towards ISO 55000. The principles of good asset management can be seen as a prerequisite to ISO 55000 compliance. An implementation, if one had to follow through with in terms of a project plan, it starts off with identifying an asset management champion, creating and appointing a multidisciplinary team. You would then perform an asset management maturity assessment. This is a reality check of where you are. It's a set of questions that might be predefined, and it will ultimately, based on your results, give you a level of maturity that you can then use to decide on what maturity level you want to be to. It must be emphasized that when you identify what needs to be done, you don't need to aspire to be level 5 or in the excellent category. If you let level 1, you might set your goal to be at level 3 because that's what you can afford. Getting to level 5 might be quite ambitious. So identifying what needs to be done is very, very important, because then you would define your short, medium, and long-term actions, and you would out of that lot, determine and develop a roadmap. Once you've got that, you would then prioritize and then improve and prioritize and do the improvement that is required. You would then develop a strategy for achieving the goals of the various considering various resources, skills, finance, etc. Based on that, you would also have to develop a change management strategy. Together with all of this, you need to monitor your performance. You have to track and develop some metrics around not only asset performance, but the performance of your project, where you would then perform assurance and condition monitoring. The other approach around implementing asset management is to start with maintenance. Use maintenance as a catalyst, adopt maintenance as a catalyst. Why? Because to improve the maturity of asset management, the organization needs to have a clear line of sight of the current practices and a vision of the end state. When you use your maintenance infrastructure, namely your people, your assets, etc., you can introduce asset management here. The introduction and change management of asset management should be here. There is a greater success for introducing and implementing your practices in a maintenance institution. The maintenance landscape comprises of various components of your computerized maintenance strategies, maintenance monitoring, etc. And a structured and incremental improvement in the maintenance landscape is fundamental for maintenance. It can be an ideal catalyst for introducing asset management. Most organizations, to some extent, have a maintenance requirement and the presence of the key building blocks for conducting maintenance. So this honeycomb typically touches on some of the maintenance components, such as your asset information and condition, your maintenance process, your maintenance planning, your maintenance scheduling, your spares management, your computerized maintenance management, etc. If one had to adopt maintenance as a catalyst for improving, then the first 4 years should be focused on introducing a computerized maintenance management system, asset information, your appropriate maintenance strategies, making sure you introduce standardized processes. You need to generate your maintenance plan and introduce monitoring and, of course, focus on financial management. The first 4 years is a focus on learning, improvability, redefining beliefs, and embedding new behaviors. Your asset management awareness, focus on maintenance-based improvement, collaboration on policies, procedures, standards, specifications, resources, etc. Purifying the maintenance landscape is what you want to achieve. Reducing wastages, introducing standardization for consistency. All of that is in the operational environment, and we call that an operational efficiency. The improvement in your operational efficiency reaches a saturation point, and one would say that once you've reached the intermediate level where you've managed the improvements introduced, you introduce new technology, you might introduce remote monitoring, inspections, introduce your asset health indices, predictive maintenance, focusing on governments, etc., introduced activity-based costing. The next step is to take your maintenance improvement to the next level. And of course, that might come at a cost, where you would start looking at predictive failures, artificial intelligence, you look at designing out maintenance, you focus on governance, embedding, making sure that your maintenance plans are there. You start introducing new investment planning, life cycle costing, and you look at zero-based costing. Your maintenance landscape can be prioritized. So in the first or the basic level, or fundamental level, you would look at things like your asset base, your maintenance documentation, your organization. And as you progress from level 7 to level 1, you would go through from intermediate, advanced, and your value contribution would increase as your maturity also increases. Of course, finally, your maintenance objectives would be met. You would then move where your original landscape was all red. It now sees progress. You would see improvement in different aspects that you are going to focus on. But it doesn't mean that that's where it ends. So you would find that we focus on the green areas. Things that are in yellow would already be things that you've planned to do. And of course, the things that are in red, you can then say that's where you want to put the next focus in. In conclusion, it is important that business decisions are made in the context of the latest information. This will ensure that they are equally applicable to the current situation and to affecting long-term sustainable goals. In the same way, therefore, it is important that all asset management practices are treated as live and evolving, for it is the outcome of asset management practices that affects and informs business decisions. Implementing asset management practices may seem like a very daunting task to organizations just starting on their asset management journey. The overall goal of asset management is to improve revenue by providing sustainable services. This requires flexibility and adaptation to changing circumstances. When one begins this journey, one soon realizes that many of the ideas, concepts, and/or tasks may already be part of one's daily operations and culture. Hitting the target is a process that does not happen overnight. One should fix the worst first, prioritize the most critical assets, followed by selecting the best sequence of fixes across the entire portfolio and life cycle of the asset. I would like to extend my gratitude to all the authors and organizations that have helped me with my asset management understanding and knowledge. And thanks to the AMEU and SAIEE for this opportunity to share some of my knowledge with you. It is most appreciated. Thank you. Over to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Archie. Thanks for that presentation on asset management theory. You have clearly showed that asset management is a structured approach and definitely is not something that we make up as we go along. So there are specific objectives to be attained, and there's certainly a systematic way to get there. So thanks, Archie.